So the first thing to remember about drawing a tree in a worm's eye view is that the bottom is going to be wider and the top is going to be really skinny. So it's like you are standing below the tree. So to make that, you're going to put a dot at the very top corner of your paper. So near the top, put a little dot. And then you're going to put 2 dots, one on this side and one on the bottom. So it's going to be right near the opposite corner of your dot. Dot. And that's just going to guide you where your line's going to go. So when you're doing this, start from one line, and your line doesn't have to be straight because trees are wiggly and wavy. As you go up, try to get closer and closer to this dot. It's going to look like a big triangle. Then from here, so with this line, just try to get closer and closer to that other line to make it nice and skinny. You don't want to start out big and then make it a big rectangle. So after that, you're going to be making the branches. You can make as many branches as you want, but it's kind of the same thing. With branches, they are bigger or wider near the trunk or the middle of the tree, and as they go out, they get skinnier. So you can make one line. Remember, branches are all different shapes and sizes. And then when you're making your second line, make sure that you start next to it, and as you go up, you get closer and closer to that line. You can make little branches coming off of it. So the second line, you're always following that first line and getting closer and closer to it. So they're just big wavy triangles. You want to make branches on both sides. You can make them go out and up. And then start at the trunk wide. As you get further and further, get closer and closer to that first line. All right, I'm going to speed this up. After you're done all of your branches, you're going to be making some texture lines with your Sharpie because trees have a lot of texture and some bark. So you can just make wiggly lines coming up. They can be like swirls. Just make some types of texture lines. And you can make them in the branches too. We're going to be coloring these. I like to color with the crayon because when we're doing watercolors, the crayon resists the water. Or colored pencil you can do. If you do washable marker and it gets wet, that's gonna bleed or spread all over your paper. So get crayons or colored pencils. I got all types of brown and one black. With this, we're gonna make it so it looks like there's a shadow on one side. So pick a side that you want the shadow on. And I'm gonna do this with a black crayon. You can also do it with, like, if you don't have this many colors, you can just press harder. Like if you're coloring it brown, if you press harder on one side, it'll make it a really dark darker shade. So with a dark brown or a black, go along one side of the tree. To make it look like a shadow. This just makes it look a little bit more realistic. You can also make some shadows or darker lines where your texture lines are. And then you're going to be coloring in the tree with different browns. And if you only have one brown, you can make lighter and darker marks with the same brown crayon or colored pencil. Like I said before, if you only have one brown, you can start shading this tree and only touching the paper lightly so it's a lighter color. And where you want darker spots, just press down a little bit harder and you'll get two tones. So you can use as many browns as you want because trees have a lot of different colors in their bark. Remember to do the branches. I'm just coloring with different browns all over and pressing a little bit harder on that side with the shadow. Now we're going to be doing the leaves around the tree. And because it's fall, we're going to be doing the warm colors. Oak trees and other trees in Pennsylvania, they turn orange, yellow, and red. And those are the warm colors. So we're going to be using red, yellow, and orange as our colors today. And they look super nice together, blended together. You don't have to worry about them making ugly colors because they are next to each other on the color wheel. Red, yellow, and orange. So there's a few ways to do this. If you're not using watercolor today and you just have markers or crayons, you can just use different shades of the warm colors and make little marks or blobs of color with the marker. And you can just start out with yellow and then keep going around and around making some color patches with the marker. So if you are using the watercolor, you're going to start out with yellow because yellow is the lightest color. And if you don't start out with yellow, the water isn't as clear. Remember, you need a paper towel. So you're going to put the water into the yellow, mix your brush up into the paint. And then this watercolor technique, you're just making patches of color by lifting your brush up and patting the paper, making little specks. So you're just dabbing the paper. If you run out of color, put some more water in there. And the yellow, you can put a lot of yellow down because the orange and the red will overlap on top of this. If you don't put a lot of yellow down, you can't put the yellow on top of the orange or the red. It won't, because it's lighter. Another way how to do this, if you don't have the watercolor paint, but if you have a cup of water and a marker, I'm going to show you how to do this with the orange because the yellow is very light. You can draw on the paper towel. So you're drawing on the paper towel with whatever color that you're using. And it has to be a dry paper towel. And once you are done, you can dip this into the water. So just fold it up a little bit, dip it into the water, and this will activate the color. And then you can put patches of color down. It's a little bit lighter than the watercolor, but it still makes a really cool effect. You can do that with the marker. Just remember not to put the marker on wet paper towel or it will ruin it. So I'm going to continue with the watercolor, making yellow all around. When you're finished with the yellow, you're just going to use the same technique with the orange and then the red. If you have a lot of watercolors, you might have a few different shades of yellow and orange and red, which you can totally do. If you just have one of each color, so do the yellow all around. Make sure you extend it to the outside. You can go over your branches. When you're switching color, rinse the brush off, and then you're wiping it onto the paper towel to get all the extra color off. And then you'll do orange. And do the same thing with the specks. You want to leave some of the yellow out so you see all of the colors that you're using. If you have time at the end, you can do a little bit of the sky by just putting the sky down here. I use a lot of water with the sky just so it's not really dark and overpowering. Be careful not to go over a lot of your leaves because blue turns the yellow green, it turns the red purple. If you want, you can have some sky peeking through a little bit. I wouldn't do a lot of that. So just go around the edge. It's just like scribbling with the paint and putting a little bit of the blue for the sky.